When I saw my last goat giving birth under the morning sun, I thought about how this piece of land represented my freedom. 10 years working as a veterinarian in corporate agricultural operations had shown me the worst of the industry. Unethical practices, mistreated animals, soil devastated by chemicals. Every day in that environment, a piece of me was dying a little more. My 5-hectare property was only 3 kilometers away from the luxurious Oak Ridge Hills condominium. When I bought it, some acquaintances questioned the proximity, but the price was perfect and the land was fertile. Besides, my stretch of rural road was clearly outside their jurisdiction. I thoroughly checked that information before signing any documents. At 42, with a specialization in agroecology, I was determined to prove that a small regenerative farm could be sustainable and profitable. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. What I didn't expect was that my real obstacles would come from mansions in the distance. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. In the first few weeks, I set up proper fences, built a modest barn, and prepared garden beds for organic vegetables. I had a meticulous plan, with every decision based on years of study and research. I chose high-value crops and even invested in purebred goats for artisanal cheese production. Within 2 months, the basic infrastructure was ready. My day would start before dawn and end long after sunset. I worked tirelessly, knowing that the first few months were crucial. I installed an efficient irrigation system that captured rainwater and used permaculture techniques to maximize water conservation. The first harvest of organic vegetables exceeded my expectations. I partnered with 3 local restaurants that were looking for quality local ingredients. The goats adapted perfectly. Everything pointed to my dream being achievable. That was until the first letter arrived. Dear owner, we have received complaints about odors coming from your property that are violating the rules of the Oak Ridge Hills Homeowners Association. I took a deep breath, holding back my irritation. My farm was impeccably clean, with waste management following the highest standards. Besides, I wasn't part of that association. I wrote a polite response, citing zoning laws that allowed agricultural activities in my area. I thought that would be the end of it. 3 days later, a man in a suit showed up at my door. He introduced himself as Alexander Westfield, the legal representative of the association. His expensive watch sparkled in the sun as he talked about community concerns and property values. Miss Reynolds, we understand your enthusiasm for agriculture, but we need to make sure everyone follows the same standards. Mr. Westfield, my property isn't under the jurisdiction of Oak Ridge Hills. I checked that before buying it. His smile didn't reach his eyes. There have been some recent changes in territorial boundaries. We would like to discuss how your property can be brought in line with our guidelines. The changes, he mentioned, were the association's attempt to redefine its limits to include my land. Soon, new letters started coming, each one more intimidating than the last. I began noticing delivery trucks being prevented from reaching my property. The secondary access road was blocked by maintenance that just wouldn't end. When I tried selling my products at a local fair, I was told that my license had been challenged. At City Hall, I found out that the association had raised questions about the legality of my operations. Each obstacle was subtle enough to seem coincidental, yet too consistent to be accidental. The situation came to a head on a sunny Tuesday when 2 police officers showed up at my door. One of them was holding an official document. We have a warrant to inspect your property for possible environmental and health code violations, the officer said, looking embarrassed. As they walked through my immaculate farm, I noticed Alexander Westfield watching from afar, from inside his gleaming car. That's when I realized, this wasn't just rich neighbors being difficult. There was something bigger at stake, and I needed to find out what it was. That night, I called James Sullivan, a lawyer specializing in property disputes whom a friend had recommended. I didn't know it yet, but that phone call would completely change the course of the battle that was just beginning. During our first meeting, James Sullivan, a 58-year-old man with gray hair and sharp eyes, spread documents across his desk as I explained my situation. "What intrigues me is their persistence," I remarked. "There are dozens of rural properties in the area. Why mine?" James adjusted his glasses. "Let's look into it. Start documenting absolutely everything. Every letter, every encounter, every roadblock. We need to establish a pattern of behavior." I followed his advice to the letter. I installed discrete cameras along the property boundaries and started recording every interaction. I noticed that the association had hired security guards who patrolled near my fence, intimidating visitors. Meanwhile, James requested public documents regarding zoning and development in the area. 2 weeks later, he urgently called me to his office. "Emma, look at this." He pointed to a detailed map of the region. I noticed something odd in the latest building permits. There's mention of an innovation corridor that would stretch right where your property is. I examined the documents, feeling my stomach drop. What does this mean? It means that bigger plans are at play. Look at these preliminary applications for infrastructure. Signed by Tech Valley Innovation, a subsidiary of NextGen Technologies. James dug a bit deeper, and we discovered a leaked corporate presentation that showed plans for a multimillion-dollar tech innovation center. In the digital image, right where my farm was, there was a futuristic building labeled Advanced Agricultural Research Center. "They don't want your land because they are snobby," James concluded. "They want it because it's essential for a massive development project." That revelation explained everything. The Homeowners Association was just the public face of a larger corporate operation. To move forward with the project, they needed my property to be seen as problematic, justifying legal action to take it over. In the following days, I noticed an unknown car photographing my farm. A surprise inspection popped up, citing concerns about animal waste runoff that could contaminate the water table, an absurd accusation given my impeccable management system. "They are building a case against you," James explained. "They'll try to claim that your operation poses an environmental risk to force a sale or eminent domain." I kept running my farm with even more determination, making sure every aspect was above reproach. I invited independent experts in regenerative farming to document my sustainable practices. A university hydrology professor confirmed that my water management system was exemplary. One afternoon, I found Alexander Westfield waiting near my gate, accompanied by a woman in business attire. "Miss Reynolds," he said with an artificial smile. "This is Christine Morgan from Tech Valley Innovation. We'd like to discuss a buyout proposal." Christine stepped forward with a rehearsed smile. "We're willing to offer double the market value for your property." I maintained a neutral expression. "I'm not interested in selling." "Maybe you should reconsider," Alexander insisted. "Things tend to get complicated for operations like yours. Lawsuits, inspections, fines. Costs can pile up fast." I recognized the veiled threat. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Westfield?" "I'm just pointing out practical realities," he replied, adjusting his expensive tie. "Our offer is only available for a limited time. I suggest you talk to your lawyer." After he left, I called James immediately, and he wasn't surprised. It's the next logical step. First they try to intimidate, then they offer money, and if nothing works, what's next? I asked. "Direct sabotage," he said gravely. "Reinforce your security, Emma. Things could get worse." His prediction came true the following week, when I woke up to find my irrigation system completely damaged. Someone had strategically cut essential pipes overnight. The repair would cost thousands of dollars, and worse yet, my crops were in danger without proper water. As I examined the damage with growing despair, I noticed tire marks leading to a spot where the fence had been discreetly cut. The cameras I installed only caught blurry shadows. The intruders knew the layout and avoided being identified. James recommended hiring a more advanced security system, but the cost was prohibitive given my already stretched budget. So I decided to install additional cameras on my own, placing them in unexpected spots, hidden among trees and structures. The attacks kept coming. One morning, I found 2 of my most valuable goats seriously ill. The vet diagnosed poisoning from a substance that shouldn't have been on the property. Luckily, we managed to save them, but the incident left me constantly on edge. "We can't prove anything," James lamented when I showed him the vet reports. "We need evidence that connects these actions directly to the association or Tech Valley." That night, I repositioned the hidden cameras and added motion sensors in strategic spots. I also set up a backup system for the recordings, storing them automatically on remote servers. 3 days later, I received an official notice. My license to operate the farm was being re-evaluated due to multiple complaints about unsanitary practices. The letter specifically mentioned photographic evidence of poor conditions, photos that could only have been obtained by someone trespassing on my property. During a forced inspection, the city inspector looked embarrassed. "Look, I don't see any problem here," he admitted softly. "But there's a lot of pressure coming from above." "From whom exactly?" I asked. He looked away. "I can't say anything more." James discovered that the mayor had recently attended a fundraising event sponsored by Next Gen Technologies. We began mapping the connections: city council members with financial ties to the development company, hefty donations for local political campaigns, and lucrative contracts promised to area businesses. "We're dealing with a well-established network of influence," James explained. "It's not just a few disgruntled neighbors." One night, while I was going over documents at my desk, I heard a commotion coming from the barn. I rushed outside and saw smoke. Someone had started a small fire near the hay storage. Luckily, I managed to put it out before it spread, but the message was clear: the attacks were escalating. The cameras captured a hooded man throwing something into the barn and then fleeing quickly. The image was blurry, not enough for a clear ID, but it was solid proof of intentional sabotage. The next morning, I found an anonymous note in my mailbox: "Sell while you still have something to sell." I took the note and the recordings to the local police station. The officer who took my report looked genuinely concerned, yet cautious. "I can file a report, but without clear identification of the person responsible." "I understand," I replied, tired of the standard response. "I just want to officially document what's happening." I went home determined not to give in to fear. That night, I invested in what could be my last chance. I hired a security specialist to install high-resolution cameras with night vision in totally discreet spots, connected to an alert system that would notify me immediately of any intrusion. The specialist, a former policeman named Mike, carefully examined my property. "They know where your visible cameras are. We'll place these where they'd never think to look." Mike installed equipment in tree hollows, under eaves, and camouflaged among existing structures. "These have the range and clarity to capture faces and license plates, even in the dark," he said. Little did I know that this investment would prove decisive. Just 2 nights later, when 3 men broke onto the property around 2 a.m. The cameras captured everything. They were wearing uniforms with the discreet logo of the security company hired by the Homeowners Association. They had backpacks filled with various equipment, including what looked like chemicals. My phone buzzed with alerts as they approached the newly repaired irrigation system. I hesitated between calling the police right away, or waiting to gather more solid evidence. I decided to dial the emergency number while still watching the live feed. "Emergency, what's your address?" the operator asked. "I'm seeing people breaking into my property right now," I replied, giving my address. "They are vandalizing my farm." "How long have they been there?" "Are you in a safe place?" "They just got in." "I'm locked inside, but I can see them on the security cameras. They seem to be carrying chemicals near my irrigation system and pastures." As the police were on their way, I watched the men pouring something into the main water reservoir. One of them was assembling what looked like a timed device on the electrical distribution box. The third was spreading a white powder along the fence that divided my property from the main road. The following minutes felt like an eternity, but finally, I saw siren lights approaching. The intruders noticed immediately, abandoned their tasks, and ran toward a car parked along the secondary road. The cameras clearly caught their faces and the license plate as they fled in a hurry. When the police arrived, I showed them the live recordings and led them to the locations where the intruders had been. The officer examined the water reservoir and immediately backed off. "This doesn't look good. We're going to need a specialist team here." Later analysis confirmed that the intruders had poured a potent herbicide into the water system that supplied both the animals and the crops. The device on the electrical box was a timer connected to a short circuit that could have sparked a devastating fire. The footage was unequivocal. With clear shots of their faces and a legible license plate, there was no denying who the intruders were. At the police station, the chief inspector watched the recordings with a grave expression. "This is substantial evidence, Miss Reynolds," he stated, pausing on the frame that clearly showed the logo of the security company Sentinel, exclusively hired by the Oak Ridge Hills Homeowners Association. James, sitting next to me, added, "And we have lab results confirming that the substance was concentrated glyphosate at levels lethal to both animals and plants. This goes far beyond ordinary vandalism." The police identified all three men in less than 24 hours. The youngest, 36-year-old Daniel Foster, was the first to be questioned. Confronted with the undeniable evidence, he quickly realized how precarious his situation was. "I was hired to do a job," he confessed once he realized he would face serious charges. "They said it was just to scare people, cause some minor damage. I didn't know about the chemicals until the very last minute." "Who exactly hired you?" the investigator asked. Daniel hesitated before answering. "I got instructions directly from Alexander Westfield. He said it was a matter for the Homeowners Association. They were dealing with a problematic property that was affecting property values." That confession was the turning point. Daniel agreed to testify in exchange for leniency, revealing details that directly linked the association and Tech Valley Innovation to the systematic attacks on my property. There was a specific plan, he revealed during his formal testimony. First, bureaucratic intimidation. Then, a buyout offer. If nothing worked, they'd make the property inoperable through progressively worse accidents until the owner had no choice but to sell. With all this evidence, James filed a comprehensive lawsuit against the Homeowners Association, Tech Valley Innovation, and several individuals involved, including Alexander Westfield. The petition detailed every incident, linking them to a larger plan for a forced acquisition as part of a technology development project. "We're alleging conspiracy, trespassing, property damage, attempted environmental contamination, and organized harassment," James explained as we reviewed the documents. "More importantly, we're seeking an emergency injunction to stop any further attempts to rezone your property or interfere with your operations." The news of the lawsuit spread quickly throughout the community. To my surprise, several neighboring small farm owners reached out, sharing similar stories of intimidation. 3 of them joined the suit as co-plaintiffs, significantly strengthening our case. During the preliminary investigations, we discovered that Tech Valley Innovation had secretly acquired 5 adjacent properties over the past 2 years, always using shell companies to hide the true buyer. My farm was the last piece needed to complete the territory puzzle for their project. The first court hearing was tense. The courtroom was packed with local residents, journalists, and corporate representatives. Alexander Westfield, sitting with his team of expensive lawyers, avoided meeting my gaze. Tech Valley Innovation had sent a battalion of legal representatives, all carrying identical briefcases and wearing impassive expressions. Judge Robert Calloway, known for his impartiality and experience with territorial disputes, listened carefully as James presented our evidence. The camera footage was shown on a large screen, clearly displaying the intruders pouring chemicals into my irrigation system. These aren't random acts of vandalism, argued James. They are part of a coordinated, systematic plan to force my client to abandon her legally acquired property, where she runs a legitimate, properly licensed business. The defense lawyers tried to argue that the individuals caught on camera were acting on their own, without official authorization from the association or the company. But that argument fell apart when James presented phone records, recovered emails, and, most importantly, the detailed testimony from Daniel Foster. Judge Calloway granted our emergency injunction, barring any further attempts to rezone or interfere with the farm's operations. More significantly, he ordered an independent investigation into the permits and approvals recently given for the Innovation Corridor project. After the hearing, a local newspaper reporter approached me for comments. I simply replied, "All I've ever wanted was to build a sustainable farm and be left alone. I never imagined this would put me at the center of a corporate conspiracy." The court-ordered investigation revealed a web of irregularities. Recovered internal emails showed that Tech Valley Innovation had known from the start that my property was zoned for agricultural use and legally protected. Even so, they had gone ahead with development plans that included it, confident that they could force me out through legal maneuvers and coordinated pressure. Even more shocking was the discovery of an internal memo discussing the elimination of rural obstacles through scalable administrative pressure and creating adverse conditions for resistant property owners. The document specifically named my farm as a priority acquisition and listed tactics that matched exactly the incidents I experienced. Howard Pierce, the company's former CEO and the original architect of the plan, was subpoenaed to testify. During his testimony, visibly uncomfortable, he admitted that the company had possibly crossed ethical boundaries in its determination to complete the project. It was a matter of return on investment, he explained coldly. We had designed a center that required a specific territorial configuration. Alternatives would have meant additional costs of millions of dollars. After 3 months of intense legal proceedings, the court issued its final decision. The ruling was unequivocally in my favor. The Homeowners Association was permanently barred from trying to incorporate my property into their jurisdiction. Tech Valley Innovation was ordered to completely redesign their project to exclude my land and to pay substantial damages for the harm caused. Alexander Westfield and 2 Tech Valley executives faced criminal charges for conspiracy and property damage. Although they eventually reached deals to avoid prison time, their professional reputations were irreparably damaged. The court victory was significant, but equally important was the community impact. Rural property owners in the area, many of whom had stayed silent out of fear of retaliation, began to organize. We formed an alliance of small farmers and landowners dedicated to preserving the balance between sustainable rural development and technological expansion. In the weeks following the case's conclusion, I received visits from several landowners seeking advice on how to protect their properties against similar tactics. An elderly farmer even came by with apple pie and tears in her eyes. "You did what many of us didn't have the courage to do," she said. "You took on the giants. With the compensation I received, I invested in expanding the farm's infrastructure. I built a small educational center where I regularly host students and farmers interested in regenerative techniques. The cheese my goats produce gained a regional reputation for its exceptional quality, and my organic vegetables now supply restaurants in 3 neighboring cities. Tech Valley Innovation eventually built its technology center in a modified configuration that respected the existing agricultural properties. Ironically, after the negative publicity from the court case, the company adopted a new green technology approach and now promotes collaborations with local farms as part of its renewed image. One spring morning, about a year after the final verdict, Alexander Westfield unexpectedly appeared at my gate. He looked different, older, less polished, without the expensive watch or the impeccable suit. "I came to apologize," he said simply. "What we did was unforgivable." I watched him for a moment before replying, "You know what's really sad, Mr. Westfield? All this conflict was unnecessary. Technology and sustainable agriculture don't have to be at odds." He slowly nodded. "Lesson learned, too late for me. I'm moving to another state, starting over. I just wanted you to know that I admire your tenacity." After he left, I walked around my property, checking on the goats grazing peacefully and the vibrant garden beds of organic vegetables. The restored irrigation system worked quietly, distributing precious water with calculated efficiency. The security cameras remained active, but now they were mainly used to monitor the animals and the wildlife that had begun thriving in the restored natural areas. The battle was over, but its lesson remained: one determined person, armed with evidence and perseverance, can effectively stand up to even the most powerful opponents. My regenerative farm was not just a business venture, but a symbol of resistance against predatory development and a model for sustainable coexistence. As the sun set over my fields, I reflected that the true victory wasn't just in the court ruling or the financial compensation. It was in the strengthened community that emerged from the conflict, in the raised awareness about property rights, and in the tangible proof that regenerative agriculture is a viable and valuable alternative to destructive industrial practices. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. The farm I nearly lost had become a beacon of hope and sustainable innovation. And I, the veterinarian who just wanted to cultivate a healthy piece of land, had inadvertently become a champion for a cause bigger than myself.